Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. It's a special meeting of the City Council. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilman Duper.
Present.
Councilman Daly.
Here.
Councilman Brower.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Popescu.
Here.
And Mayor Rigsby.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Are there any items to be added or deleted? Thank you. Okay, this is the time for oral reports for the public to speak on any item not on the agenda. Since there's only one item on the agenda, it looks like everybody's here for that. So we'll move on to item E. We're considering council action regarding redistricting the redistricting commission's draft district map. We have the possibility of writing a letter, adopting a resolution, or other action, including attendance or testimony at the hearings of the commission by city representatives. This issue came up, and I called this meeting because the redistricting commission put out a preliminary map initially that had Loma pulled away from its historic alignment with communities to our east and aligned us with communities to our west. There was some input to the commission on this topic, and there was input by other cities, including Highland. Highland was stripped away from Redlands in the first draft, and in the second draft that's recently come out, Highland has been rejoined with Redlands, but Loma Linda is still absent from that alignment. So to the extent that we care about that, I think we should talk about it today and decide what our action would be. I think that we got a little bit of a hint in our last city council meeting where the reports of councilmen were consumed by comments on the topic, and I think we need to go to the next step of taking a formal agendized action. So does anybody have any comments?
Can we talk a little bit about timing and what exactly we're going to try to accomplish and how much time do we have to accomplish it?
My understanding is that this week is pretty much the last time for any input to the commission. So this is why we called a special meeting this week. And whether it's tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, I'm not sure, but I think the sooner we get any input into the commission, the better.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was at one point the city of Redlands was cut in half, and when the mayor of Redlands spoke to the districting commission, the second draft, they added that half back into the district?
Yeah, Redlands is now totally within its old historic district, and they added portions of Highland that were previously missing. So there has been some shift in that direction. And if we care, we can argue for a further shift in our direction or not.
Do we know why the Redistricting Commission decided to move further west and divide up the district?
I don't know that I'm the expert on it, but I think it's because they succumbed to the arguments that were put forward by Redlands.
No, meaning why was it originally they chose to split up our district to begin with?
Well, it's hard to read into that, but my understanding is that it was kind of an arbitrary just line drawing around certain size populations and then see what kind of reaction there was to it. That's the impression I got. It was kind of a guess and then subject to public input for refinement. And if you look at their own criteria, they talk about trying to avoid dividing communities and things like that. So they quickly realized that that was an error and unified Redlands in one district rather than splitting it down the middle.
And Mr. Mayor, for public information, where in the current proposal, where does Loma Linda stand now?
Loma Linda is currently in a district to the west of the historic district that we've been in aligned with Redlands. So I don't even know what district that is.
For example, are there other communities, or are we as...
I went on the commission website this afternoon, and the map that I found there, as Mayor said, basically drew a line to the west of Redlands all the way to the Riverside County line, which is the natural dividing areas. They're trying to keep it by the county line, and then had everything to the west of Redlands to the Riverside County line, so i.e. Loma Linda, Grand Terrace, basically the city of San Bernardino, and then over to Colton and Rialto was, and into the edge of Fontana are all in the quotes new district. The one thing, you know, I think they are trying to do in their credit is there's no question the preliminary maps have way less gerrymandering and are attempting to follow some cohesive geographical boundaries, but on the other hand, I think these criteria as you listed with the community importance really are key, and there's undeniably the community common economic and social interests that tie us much closer to Highland and Redlands than any of those other areas. So sorry, long answer, and then I was just going to add, I think one of the strongest arguments we can put in there, and there's many we can elucidate, but certainly the common Redlands School District, we are in common working relationships to everyone in the Redlands School District, which encompasses Loma Linda, Highland, Redlands, and it makes sense to me to advocate that we preserve those working relationships, and even as Supervisor Neil Derry has written to the Commission, in essence, Loma Linda and Redlands really are sister cities functionally, economically, and socially, and it would be counterproductive to the Commission's goals to split us for those community interest reasons.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for, and I wanted to get that information out. And I agree with Councilman Brower that traditionally when we talk about the East Valley, those communities are Redlands, Loma Linda, Highland, and we talk about the relationship that we have had with those cities and communities, and especially the school district, which encompasses all three. I think it is important that we maintain a cohesive representation in this area. So
Okay, so we've got at least some people expressing that staying with Redlands would be a favorable thing. If that is where we're going with this argument, then we need to flesh out the components of that argument. So we've heard that Redlands Unified School District is kind of a natural working relationship that's been spread out over multiple decades. If you look historically at the relationship between Redlands and Loma Linda, it's been, you know, pretty much as though they were one community. Redlands was incorporated much earlier than Loma Linda, but Loma Linda has a healthcare emphasis in its business world. And if you look at least the medical staff of the medical center, I would say a solid majority of the physicians who work at Loma Linda live in Redlands. And it would be a little bit odd for those people to have to address different representatives for their work interests versus their living home interests. So we have work-live relationships that are established over essentially a century. Any other arguments that?
No argument, but a question, because I'm still trying to understand the implications of this. What would the practical implications or impact be on the city of Loma Linda or the residents of Loma Linda if the district lines as they're currently drawn remains? What are the downsides that I need to be aware of?
Well, I think it's a subjective thing, but my concern would be that we would be within the Redlands sphere of influence. We have our historical place, and our place as Loma Linda is as the major healthcare employer for the Inland Empire. and Redlands and Loma Linda are in alignment with that. My concern with having the center of gravity of the district moving westward is that their concerns are different. It's historically not the same emphasis, and our interactions with government have been, having a representative from Redlands, they're naturally aligned with Loma Linda University Medical Center's needs because of this historic relationship. And if we become grafted onto a more westerly district, then we're not the center of gravity that we used to be. So Loma Linda kind of loses some of its influence. It's if you look at the both of the working populations and I don't have any concerns about the communities to our west. My issue is that they've got different issues vis-a-vis the federal government and the state government. And if we're just kind of and by the way, Loma Linda has some concerns as well, I think we become second fiddle in that environment. And that's my concern. We, next to Redlands, have just as much of a say as Redlands does, because Redlands and Loma Linda are united and always have been historically and culturally. If we go if we're stripped out from that and go with a more westerly district, they've got issues of Fontana, issues of Rialto, issues of Colton, issues of Grand Terrace, and issues of San Bernardino, and we would be pretty much in the corner. So does that?
I would expand a little bit on that. I don't know the makeup of all the cities as far as population that are presently in this district. However, traditionally, we're about 20-some thousand people. Redlands is about 70. I think Yucaipa is in the 40 to 50,000 range. Highlands another 50,000 range. If our small city, and we're one of the smallest city next to Grand Terrace, gets moved west, I think the amount of representation that we have as a city within the congressional district decreases significantly, because we would be a truly minority city versus we're much more population-wise closer to some of the other cities. And for example, San Bernardino has 200,000 people, Rialto has over 100,000, and Fontana has 200,000 or close to 200,000. And I believe Colton has around 70. So we become basically kind of the minority city, and that's one of the things we talked about, how I think that traditionally we have been represented well because geographically we've been aligned with some of these other cities, and I think that's a very compelling argument why we want to maintain that in order to maintain the representation we do have from a population standpoint.
If I read the material I've been given, the districts are supposed to be approximately equal in population, so the numbers wouldn't bear it out. But if I'm understanding you and the mayor, the concern is that our voice may be diminished because some of the issues that would be of concern to Loma Linda are different than perhaps would be of concern to Fontana or Rialto.
Yes, where they're aligned when Redlands, Yucaipa, and Highland are put in the mix, their interests are roughly aligned with ours, and we wouldn't have to have a representative that would have to start playing. Which interest am I going to represent in this topic? It's going to be a split in their interests.
A couple of other arguments I think we could at least briefly throw in there is, without getting into other issues, the San Bernardino International Airport Commission is an entity that came out of the East Valley, had no representation, never has, from any of the western communities, and originally had Redlands, Highland, Loma Linda, San Bernardino basically, and Colton. And for various reasons, Redlands eventually dropped out, but again, it highlights highly regional facility of importance, and those communities around it have functioned cohesively together, not Fontana and Rialto, etc. The other argument, then looking at the commission website, I noticed a number of some of the western communities in San Bernardino County had letters from residents complaining that aligning themselves with any of the more eastern San Bernardino County communities doesn't make sense because of the different patterns of commute, different patterns of social and shopping patterns, and even mentioning the Little League activities, saying, well, the western San Bernardino County, we all go to Little League games together. We don't go to the same ones that the eastern areas do. So I think there are a lot of bullet points we could put as far as the way the communities function, and it making much more sense to have the East Valley emphasis.
Yeah, and there's kind of a natural geographic boundary with the I-215 freeway that defines that shopping. People from Loma Linda tend to shop in Redlands and the donut hole to the north of Redlands, and the commutes that occur along the Barton corridor are huge numbers of people. And
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One other question that's a little bit, I guess, a little similar. Whenever I'm trying to make a case to somebody, I try to get in their heads as much as possible. What do we understand about the Commission's motives or intent in redrawing these district lines in the first place? Or do we have any idea?
We don't really have any understanding. The best that I can determine is that they are somewhat ignoring the traditional reasons for doing it, and the motives behind gerrymandering are purely political, and this is an apolitical entity, so it doesn't have any of that. It basically they said, let's just start drawing roughly contiguous blocks of communities, and they probably started in Santa Monica and worked their way through LA and started going east, and that's where it divided up when the populations ran out. That's the best I can figure. They figured, well, this district ended up right there to get the X number of voters or citizens in it, and then the next one started over here, and it broke up this natural community relationship. And we're just arguing that one of their goals is goal number 4, respect cities, counties, communities of interest, and neighborhoods to the extent possible. And that's, to me, that's my argument. We have a combined community that it's not, the current boundaries don't respect.
And sorry, throw out just one more point. As long as we're trying to put as many issues on the table, I think we even effectively can make a bullet point or argument in the letter. We even have a park here in Loma Linda named after a citizen of Redlands. Shows how close our community ties are. That citizen's longtime physician in our community, but is a longtime Redlands resident. So again, highlighting our close community ties.
And none of this is to discount some of the tremendous work we're doing with some communities to our west to work on mutual approaches to fire suppression and working with fire departments. None of that is being discounted by this argument. We also have relationships with communities that are within the Western District but are east of the 215. But that also points out that our major relationships with the communities to our west are only up to the 215 boundary. Beyond that, we really don't have any relationship at all.
But I was going to say that I would actually like to see Colton try to stay further with the East Valley here, and would hope that they would be thinking along the same lines, because they are kind of in that pocket. It's not only the 210, but it's the 10. I'm sorry, the 215, but it's a 10 also. And a lot of what we do is boxed in by both those freeways. Another thing to consider is we have some mutual issues. For example, some transportation stuff. We have the issue here at California and Redlands Boulevard with that intersection, and working on federal monies to fix that. And I think it's helpful to be represented by one singular representative, as opposed to we would have on either side of the street now 2 different representatives, and that may cause issues with those type of funding sources. Not sure if that's a good argument.
I would actually kind of argue along the same lines. If you kind of look, kind of step back and say, okay, well, what is the congressman supposed to do? What's their role? And that is to represent his constituents. Well, what does that entail? What entails, if you look at every single department within the federal government, and they all have budgets, and they all try to provide services within that. Traditionally, we talked a little bit about healthcare, but traditionally one of the reasons that we have in common with the present district is the fact that we've got the Veterans Hospital here that was represented by the same congressional district for many years, and it makes it a little more challenging where you're now starting to take this whole vital institution and say, okay, Mr. New Congressman, now you need to represent this. Can he do it? Yes. However, it's like starting from day one. It's almost like you're being pulled from a family and being adopted into a new family, and now you're spending the next 20 years trying to educate the new family about why is it that we need to fix Anderson versus we need to fix Sierra or Citrus or any of the other issues. And I think Mr. Brower alluded to it earlier. For many years, when Norton Air Force Base was active, it was this congressional district that helped represent those interests. And now we're working very hard in trying to revitalize that area, and it makes sense that we maintain the cohesive group that has been working with us. Not to say that the West End hasn't. In fact, there has been some legislation that was co-sponsored by that congressional district as well. However, it is still being spearheaded by the congressional district that we're primarily in. And we want to continue to maintain those relationships and see to it that those projects that we started 15, 20 years do come to fruition rather than trying to start from scratch.
And for simplicity, it's, if we look at the group that we're tentatively going to be joining, let's say Rialto, Fontana, I would say their focus and development right now is up in the 210 corridor with all the shopping centers and things that are going on around Sierra, between Sierra and Riverside. So they're represented by their representative for that area, and that person's pushing hard for federal dollars to go into those specific places. And then Loma Linda comes out of the background and says, hey, but we've got a project or we've got something that we need down here. And it's hard, it would be hard to fight for that particular representation when we're that far out of that corridor. Yet right next door we have the donut hole, the Redlands area, which is Ukaipa, like you mentioned earlier, Ukaipa and Highland, and people from all these different communities. That's where we go and we shop and we spend, and our arteries going in and out, our transportation in and out of there directly affects us. So again, nothing negative to say about those West End communities. They've always done very well sticking together. We think we've always done pretty well with our communities over here too.
Just to pile on that point, I really do think that's the key to emphasize the focus on the eastern side of the San Bernardino Valley and how it has functioned in all these areas so much more as a unit with common interests versus the western end, and then we can split out those different issues we talked about. And I think it's very valid. You know, you got to have enough population, and I think it's very reasonable if it's proposed that we say yes. We certainly have a lot more interests in all these areas and relationships with San Bernardino than we do to cities to the west, again, just because of geography. And so if they want to add, you know, more population in that, I think that's very reasonable versus way to the west.
And to that extent, when you look at one of their requirements, the requirements are to be compact districts and not stretch them out. If you look at the first draft, and I haven't seen the second draft, but the first draft had the district that Redlands is included in running all the way up to Inyo and Mono counties, so it's a huge stretch. And I just happen to think that if you started, if the districting commission started on the east end of the valley and started drawing circles around a population of that size, we would have easily been in the Redlands, and then they would have shifted all the lines a little bit further to the west as they went to the coast. And then they wouldn't have had to say, oh, there aren't enough population left in this Redlands district, so we need to climb all the way up into Inyo and Mono counties to pull enough people in to make it a full district. So it looks to me, it has the appearance of starting in the west and working their way east and having this leftover district that had to kind of climb around and crawl around to fill it up. Whereas culturally, they should have started on the east and included us and then gone west. So,
In looking at the documentation regarding what the commission needs to know in order to decide how this redistricting is impacting you, one of the issues they discuss is social interests. Well, and I'm not sure this actually fits into that, but if you look at the cities on the west end, they've actually both grown significantly in the last 10 years, much more than the cities of Redlands or Loma Linda. We did grow as well, but not in nearly as much. So obviously, when cities grow, that means they have new young populations. Our constituents tend to be retired and older folks, especially in Redlands and Loma Linda and Yucaipa. So you'll notice that as a result, you're going to have a constituency who's probably more concerned with Medicare and Social Security and those type of issues, Veterans Affairs. That's why our district is known for dealing a lot with Veterans Affairs. So it's clear based on growth why we're socially perhaps not in the same at the same level as the other district. The congressional district look at population. They don't look at the breakup of the population of how many people of this type or this type of a background. So that's one, I think, a very important reason why we want to maintain the cohesive group that we've had up to this point, which is populations that have things in common. I think two of the main things in my view is the redevelopment of the airport. I think that's a huge issue, and also the healthcare perspective, the fact that we've got the medical center and the VA here, and many of the folks who work there literally live in Redlands and tend to live on the east end. It seems a little counterproductive if we have congressional representation where it may represent the employee versus the employer by two different congressional districts. So it makes sense that you want to keep it together. So, because usually what's good for the employer is good for the employee. And so that's why some of those issues tend to work well together, such as transportation and other needs.
What is the outcome that we're trying to achieve tonight?
I
understand we're focusing on criteria number 4 with respect to cities, counties, communities of interest, and neighborhoods to the extent possible without violating above requirements. So I think we've clearly articulated that Redlands and Loma Linda are communities of interest. I think the point that Councilman Brower made that I assume is an important one related to sharing the same school district is something that would resonate with them, and some of these others perhaps as well. But where are we going? Are we simply trying to come up with our list and then create a task force to generate a letter or provide live testimony?
Well, one of the possibilities is to assign to a subcommittee of the council the task of preparing the document or attending meetings and providing testimony. So that's one way to make it a little bit easier, because otherwise we could just sit here and pound out a document, and I don't know that we're best set up to do that in public. I think that that all of the things that inform the document should be discussed in this meeting, and then we can work on a draft.
Two things that kind of sounds like we're all on the same page here as far as what we think. Do we need to open it up and do a public hearing and garner some comments, and then let's make a motion on whatever direction we're going to go, and then we can figure out what to put into that if we do that.
Okay, it's not a formal public hearing, but we do invite people to speak on items on the agenda, and this is the only agenda item, so if anybody in attendance would like to speak, this is your chance. I see some historically talkative people in the audience. Looks like nobody's jumping at the opportunity. Either they agree with us or they've given up on us. So, one of the two. So then, is there
Well, if we have no
motion.
further comment, I'll make a motion that we, was the feeling we designate an ad hoc committee? Would that make it easier? Based on some of the things we've already mentioned, with two people working together, be able to get this thing done faster, and okay, that's my.
Just throwing out ideas, you know, my reading of the commission website, it sounded like there were some deadlines coming up as early as tomorrow on input. I'm almost wondering, just due to the pressing time, and just, again, just thinking out loud, if the mayor, acting city manager, and city clerk just worked to put a letter together and get it out in the next 24 hours, that seems like might be the most expedient, but I'm just throwing ideas out.
Now,
And-
is there a hearing coming up as well? Is this,
That I don't know. I
because
saw the
think personal
deadline for
testimony
comment.
ordinarily is going to have more impact than a letter alone, so I'd like to see us do both if that would fit the schedule that we're under.
I don't recall seeing anything on the website as far as any hearing coming up, but I don't pretend to have any extensive knowledge of that.
My understanding, as far as public testimony, that period has come and gone. Now it's left to public input via letters or the rest of us. That's why we're acting at this latest hour to try to put something together.
If I'm looking at the right website, there are some hearings, but they start tomorrow in Sacramento.
Yeah, and
Everything I see here is Sacramento.
for local stuff, it already has come and gone.
Yeah, all the local ones are gone.
So we could only influence the Sacramento discussions. So it'd probably be a letter without any personal attendance.
On the website also, there's an option to email them directly, and we could also individually do that.
And any citizens, you know, or 2 or 3 viewers and so forth, I think all of us would highly encourage that, because again, go on the commission website, there's a lot of emails from just individual citizens of different communities with their input, so I think that is very helpful. So please join us, anyone that feels like they have similar concerns, and go on the commission website. It's pretty easy to just send an email.
I was just wondering, do you feel, as mayor, you have enough bullet points with enough articulated criteria to put together in a more detailed letter?
Yes, I believe I do. I've taken extensive notes, and we have the transcript that we can use, and then we can, of course, obtain a few more lines of information from individuals that may speak up in the interim. But I think probably appropriate motion would be to assign. It looks like it's heading in my direction, to assign me and staff to prepare a letter that enumerates the principles that we've laid out tonight, and authorize that be an official communication from the city.
Is the mayor comfortable with one of us making a motion to that effect at this time, or would you like further discussion?
I think a motion is always in order, and we can always discuss after the motion is made and seconded.
I'll make that motion. I think I was heading that direction anyway. The motion is that the mayor be given the direction to proceed with staff and write this letter, unless he would like to take a flight to Sacramento tomorrow.
I would second that motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the topic? Any counter arguments? Any further embellishments? Okay, hearing none, then we'll vote. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, then it sounds like it passes unanimously. We have our further minimal topics, reports of councilmen. Is there anyone who would like to speak on any other topic? Looks like this is going to be a short one. Any reports of officers? None. Then we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. We felt your presence, even though we didn't hear it.
Frustrating thing, you know, you have no idea where the commission's going to draw the line. So the original hearing, I don't think necessarily thought, I think they were going to split Redlands up.
But they did tell us there was.
Well, yeah, but see, what we thought is, we thought that there was enough input in the first round to get what we wanted, and they went a little bit, they went halfway to us, but they didn't